Harry's Wife, part 100.19. How can anyone see me as a diva? Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. You will have had the pleasure, in inverted commas, of being aware of the second podcast that came from Harry's Wife, where she engaged in some kind of discussion with Mariah Carey. If I recall correctly, and I must admit I tend to jettison information about Harry's Wife fairly promptly, it was to do with the duality of Diva. And, in the course of this, Mariah Carey pulled up Harry's Wife with regard to her declaration that she didn't do Diva, or words to that effect. I, of course, have addressed this in parts passim, in terms of what was reported with regard to the exchange, but here I'm going to play you the relevant sound clips. The first one is where Mariah Carey interjects and makes the point about Harry's Wife actually being a diva, and then later on, the very interesting response of Harry's Wife, where it's almost as if she creeps back into the studio and says, "Has she gone? Good. Now I'm going to get my own back on that horrible woman," and whisper conspiratorially in those breathy, hushed tones into the microphone. I don't seek to emulate those tones, they're annoying enough. Instead, I prefer, when I do my impression of Harry's Wife, to let that whining creature that lurks within her come to the fore. Hence, I'm not seeking to do an entirely accurate representation of the voice that you hear, but what I do is give you an accurate representation of what's really going on. So we're going to embrace both sound clips to find out precisely why she says as she does and behaves in the manner that she says, and of course to explain to you the exchange and interaction between the two. We'll start off first with the initial sound clip where Mariah Carey pulls her up, then I'll provide you with the analysis. Here it comes.
And I think that's really important for people to remember that there might be this persona. And yes, the diva thing we can play into. I mean, it's not something that I connect to, but for you, it's been a huge part of your...
Give us diva moments sometimes, Meghan. Don't even act like... Don't act like you. It's also the visual. It's the visual. A lot of it's the visual. Because
see, that's the thing. I associate it differently.
Well, I know, but let's pretend that you weren't so beautiful and didn't have the whole thing and didn't often have gorgeous ensembles. You wouldn't get as much diva stuff. I don't care. I'm like, when I can, I'm going to give you diva.
Okay, so there it is, courtesy of the Meghan Kelly show, where the clip was aired. Harry's Wife is mumbling on in her usual way, showing what a crap interviewer she is, spending more time talking than allowing the interviewee to speak. That's the way that it is, because she is so preoccupied with the flannel that comes out of her flapping gums. She starts off by saying, we can play into the persona about diva. It's not something I connect to. She, of course, recognises that the word diva has a stigma associated with it, that it's somebody that attracts lots of attention, throws hissy fits, thinks that they're wonderful, basically, darling, you are wonderful, all that type of thing, that has ridiculous demands in their shows and so forth. And she does not, and genuinely does not see herself as that. Her narcissism does not allow her to see when she acts in a diva manner. As soon as she says that, however, Mariah Carey is driven to set her straight, because that doesn't accord with her view that she has of Harry's Wife. Also, of course, Mariah Carey needs to bring it back to her also, and her own narcissism isn't content with Harry's Wife sitting there going, yada, 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 diva, yada, yada, diva, yada, diva, not something I buy into. Mariah Carey's narcissism sat there going, when is it our turn? Come on, let me speak. And eventually loses patience, and so she interjects by saying, you can have some diva moments. Now, here, We have the utilisation of the truth in the way that Piers Morgan regularly utilises the truth of what Harry's wife is, and the way that I do in order to explain her behaviours to you. Similarly, Mariah Carey's narcissism makes use of the truth to point out, no, you saying that you don't act as a diva isn't right, you do. The reason that's the driver for it isn't because she's a truth seeker, but rather because her own narcissism needs to halt Harry's wife talking about herself and allow her involvement so that she can assert control over Harry's wife. Of course, the moment that she says, you can have some diva moments, that is challenge fuel to Harry's wife. She's receiving fuel from the response of Mariah Carey, a non-intimate secondary source, but she's being told that she's a diva. The label is being used against her. The very thing that she says that she's not, she's being accused of, and that does not sit well with her need for control. Remember, this is going on in the unconscious. She then responds in order to nullify that threat because her narcissism causes her to feel indignant about this observation. What kind of diva moments do I have? She announces incredulously. At this point, they talk over one another, an absence of boundary recognition and also reinforcing the fact that she's a shit interviewer. Mariah Carey then follows up by saying, it's also the visual. Let's pretend you weren't so beautiful. You didn't have the whole thing, the gorgeous ensembles. And she's in effect looking to assert control with some flattery. The blow has been landed. The provocation arrived. The barb was shot into her. And it did its job. It provoked Harry's wife to respond, thus giving fuel to Mariah Carey, and wrenched her away from her own monologue. The reaction is an attempt to get control. Of course, she doesn't immediately give Carey that control because she announces, what kind of diva moments do I have? That challenges Carey. Carey responds by maintaining that she's a diva, but doing it in effect as a backhanded compliment by saying, you're still a diva, but it's actually to do with the fact that you're beautiful and it's a whole thing and you have these gorgeous ensembles. She's still calling her a diva, the blow is still landing, but it's dressed up in something marshmallow and fluffy. She then, of course, then goes on to state, I don't care, when I can, I give you diva. She's more forthright. Her narcissism is less passive-aggressive compared to that of Harry's wife. Harry's wife, remember, thinks that she's a bananitarian, that she's kind, that she's helpful, that she's empathic. Mariah Carey's more of, I am what I am, and sure, I'll give you diva because fuck you. I'm a diva, I'm great at what I do, I sing, I've sold millions of records, I've got millions in the bank. People want diva, they get diva from me. You call me a diva, I'm down with that. So her narcissism harnesses that and doesn't see it as stigmatic. Harry's wife's narcissism does. Carey's narcissism embraces the title and also demonstrates, in a sense, the smackdown that she's giving Harry's wife because, one, she calls her up on the statement that she doesn't believe that she's a diva. She provokes her by saying, oh, yes, you are. And then nullifies the threat to control posed by Harry's wife by saying, have a backhanded compliment, which, of course, dim-witted Harry's wife swallows it whole, thinking, oh, she's being nice about me, okay, and at the same time, then follows it up with another slap by basically saying, I'm far more confident than you, I embrace my inner diva, you're one, but you can't. So this is, in effect, a triple slap in the face of Harry's wife. First slap. You're having diva moments. Second slap. Backhanded compliments about being beautiful, etc., but I'm still calling you a diva. And then third slap. I'm a diva, and I'm brilliant at it, and I don't have to be a little whinging girl like you. It's a triple slap down from Mariah Carey, and in this clash of the narcs, Carey won. Now, that's the initial interaction between the two. Let's move on to the second snippet, again courtesy of the Meghan Kelly show, and find out what Harry's wife did next.
The following.
It was all going swimmingly. I mean, really well. Until that moment happened, which I don't know about you, but it stopped me in my tracks. When she called me a diva. You couldn't see me, obviously, but I started to sweat a little bit. I started squirming in my chair in this quiet revolt. Like, wait, what? No, what? Huh? But that, how could you? That's not true. That's not, why would you say that? My mind genuinely was just spinning with what nonsense she must have read or clicked on to make her say that. I just kept thinking in that moment, was my girl crush coming to a quick demise? Does she actually not see me? So she must have felt my nervous laughter, and you all would have heard it too. And she jumped right in to make sure I was crystal clear. When she said diva, she was talking about the way that I dress, the posture, the clothing, the quote-unquote fabulousness as she sees it.
Okay, there's the second clip. I expect you've already been formulating in your own minds as dedicated students of my work what's going on, but let me unpack it for you. So Harry's wife essentially provides an edit to add that it's almost that she has crept back in afterwards. As I mentioned earlier, has she gone? Good. Now I can say my piece and not be concerned about being slapped down. Shows the coward that she is. It's all right for Harry's wife to bully a member of staff and hide behind supposed hierarchies of title and to bully 3-year-old girls at dress fittings. But when it comes to a one-on-one in a recording studio with someone who's got actual talent and has sold millions of records and is bringing the narcissistic sass, she shrinks away from it because her brand of narcissism isn't able to deal with it. Of course, thereafter, having shrunk back under the response of Mariah Carey thinking that she was being nice about her, Harry's wife needs the last word. This is a common narcissistic manipulation, and I'd encourage you to watch my video, The Last Word, to understand more about why the narcissist engages in this behaviour. So she kicks off with this clip by saying, "It was all going swimmingly. I mean, really well," as if to say, everybody loves me. Anybody who comes into contact with me is completely absorbed by how beautiful and charismatic and magnetic and wonderful that I am. And even though I do say all of this myself about how swimmingly well it was going. And then, until that moment, looking, of course, to make it more dramatic than it actually is, after all, it is a guest on her shitty podcast, and she states, "I don't know about you, but it stopped me in my tracks." No, it didn't, Harry's wife. You carried on talking. So, revision of history. What actually occurred was you started going mumble, mumble, bumble, bumble, bum, talking about the fact that what kind of diva moments do I have, and muttering away and talking over Mariah Carey. So it didn't stop you in your tracks at all. Horseshit. Then, pause for even more dramatic effect, when she called me a diva. Oh, the horror, the indignation, the sheer audacity of Mariah Carey calling Harry's wife that. How incorrect, how insolent and impertinent of Mariah Carey to call her the most un-diva-like person on the planet. She's not a diva. No. You couldn't see me, obviously, Harry's wife continues. I started sweating a little, squirming in my chair in quiet revolt. You'd like to think so. How? What? That's not true. Why would you say that? Pity play. After the event, defiance. Ooh, she's ever so tough when Mariah's not around. And then, this is sensational, this part. Genuinely, my mind was just spinning with what nonsense she must have read or clicked on for her to say that. This is at the core of Harry's wife. If you criticised me, you must be deluded and a nut job and a mental case. Because why would anybody criticise me, the most wonderful human being on the planet, the kindest, most elegant, most beautiful, most empathic person you could ever meet, the most talented bananatarian that the universe has ever witnessed. How could you? If you're criticizing me, there's something wrong with you. There's nothing about me that could ever be criticized. And this is a brilliant encapsulation of her narcissism. It will not let her accept that there could be anything wrong with her. And therefore, the only plausible explanation must be that Mariah Carey has been tainted by some misinformation. Now do you see why Harry's wife so regularly accuses other people of misinformation? Her narcissism drives her to do it. There can only be one reason why you would criticize me. You've been fed the wrong facts. You've been given the wrong information. And that's why Harry's wife wants to stop people speaking out. She wants to crush that freedom of speech because you're not allowed to criticize her. And if you do, if she kind of likes you, then she will put it down to the fact that you must have heard or read something that's incorrect about her. She doesn't, of course, ever seek to directly assert control against Mariah Carey. The facade lights flashing on her panel of manipulations, it won't let her do that, because having a catfight in the studio wouldn't have been good for the optics. Although the rest of us, it would have been hilariously entertaining as she'd have been bitch-slapped into next week by Mariah Carey. Nevertheless, her narcissism does not take her by the direct assertion of control and caused her basically to be slapped down in that moment. And then, because the lack of control has persisted thereafter, it has driven her to essentially sneak back into the studio, edit it further, create this addendum of saying, here's my last word. But this section of saying she must have read something, some nonsense, or clicked on something, shows what's at the heart of Harry's wife's mindset. Nobody could legitimately ever criticize her unless they've been misinformed, or, in other circumstances, they're a racist, a hater, or misogynist. She carries on. I kept thinking in that moment, was my girl crush coming to an end? Note she doesn't say, in that moment I thought to myself, could she possibly be right? Am I a diva? Maybe I should reflect on that. Again, her narcissism will not let her do that. And instead, it's all about, actually, I'm going off you. Therefore, I'm now asserting control over you by saying, nah, I don't like you anymore because you said something nasty to me. She carries on. She must have heard my nervous laughter, and all of you had done too as well. And so she jumped right in to make sure I was crystal clear, talking about the way I dress, the posture, the clothing, the quote-unquote fabulousness as she sees it. No, again, that demonstrates the short-sighted nature of Harry's wife, and she doesn't realise that Mariah Carey followed up with another slap down with a backhanded compliment. What Harry's wife is doing there is trying to convince all of you that she wants to make it crystal clear that she is only a diva in the sense of all of the fabulousness. Again, it's a brilliant example of compartmentalization. In the earlier segment, we can play into this persona, but it's not something I connect to. Dismisses it. Then, she's called a diva. She then comes back into the studio and essentially complains about that, saying that she must have read some nonsense if she thinks that I'm a diva. I most certainly am not. And then barely seconds later, accepts that she's a diva if it means somebody who is beautiful, has a particular posture, clothing, and fabulousness. So she contradicts herself, and it shows her compartmentalization. These clips are fantastic in terms of helping you understand not only the dynamic where narc meets narc, but also more about the way that Harry's wife carries on. Her narcissism didn't allow her to assert control directly, and she did so indirectly, in a cowardly way of the mid-ranger that she is. She came along and essentially smeared Mariah Carey by saying she must have lost her fucking mind if she's calling me a diva, but then also saying, but she redeemed herself because she wanted to make sure I was all right, because she truly cares about me, humble Harry's wife, and that she means that I'm beautiful and I wear beautiful clothes and I'm very special, so you'd all better fucking understand that, get it? And thus, her narcissism did not lead her to assert control directly because of the facade and because she's essentially a cowardly mid-ranger. And instead, She had to suck it up in that moment, but it didn't sit well with her, festered moments thereafter, and resulted, no doubt, perhaps on a re-listening to it, or perhaps as a mention from a producer bringing it back onto the radar, that she then had to record an additional piece when Carey was not there, and thus put her down, make her sound like she's wonderful, and that Mariah Carey actually was possibly out of her mind with the comment until it realised that actually she meant it in a really lovely, lovely way. Thus, she achieved that indirect assertion of control that she requires, whilst exhibiting further manipulation, unconscious of course, delusion, and the response to the threat to control. An absolutely excellent example, and one would I encourage you to share far and wide to enable people to understand more about the behaviours of Harry's wife. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.